Hello and welcome to Community Foundation's monthly Let's Talk. These are 30-minute quick dives into opportunities to learn more about what's going on in a particular part of the mission-driven sector. And we've been doing these monthly since August of 2020. So this is our 13th or 14th Let's Talk session. We're very excited and happy to have with us two folks from the Human Services Coalition. We have Simone Gatson and Brett Irish, who are both 211 housing specialists. And they are here to help us understand a little bit more about housing needs and two new programs, the New York State Emergency Rental Assistance Program, ERAP, and the Housing Stability Support Program, as well as finding out more about how our local community is utilizing 211, which is the non-emergency information and referral call-in and other ways of accessing information services. And we're very happy the Human Service Coalition is a very important partner in the Community Foundation. So I'm going to turn it over to Simone and Brett now, who will present some information. We very much welcome your questions. You can put them in the chat box. Our colleague Nancy Masici from the Community Foundation will take a look at those. And this is being recorded and will be made available on our website, along with all the other videos and PowerPoints. Simone, if you can get me that power, I already have the PowerPoint, I'm sorry. I will post that on the website as well. So I'll turn it over to Simone and Brett right now. Thank you and welcome.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Brett Irish, and I'm here with Simone, just getting the slides going here. So we're both 211 housing specialists, and we're going to be talking about housing and 211 services today. So first, just want to share a little bit about our roles. So as George said, we work on the 211 information referral helpline for Tompkins and Cortland County. We receive cold calls from people with a variety of needs in our community, but we particularly are focusing on housing needs. We also work with the Ithaca Evictions Displacement Defense. So the goal of this project is to prevent displacement from the city of Ithaca by preventing avoidable non-payment evictions. So we do this with a racial equity focus to address current and historic institutional inequities.
Yeah, and to meet those goals, what we actually do in our day-to-day role is that we administer a basic income program that George touched on before. It's the Housing Stability Supplement Program for City of Ithaca residents, which we'll touch a bit more on later. We also attend eviction court to offer resources to landlords and tenants that are facing eviction, and we also complete emergency rental assistance program applications with tenants. And so just so that we're all on the same page about what housing looks like in our community, I just wanted to present a few statistics to get started. So first off, just highlighting the fact that Ithaca is rent burdened. 74% of our city residents are renters, and all of these statistics were taken from an independent analysis of 2018 eviction data for the city of Ithaca. So this is before the pandemic. But that percentage is really high. The national average in 2018 was about 36% of households that were renting. So we are a community of renters, and 56% of those renters are cost burdened, so paying more than 30% of their income towards their rent, and that's before taxes. And 41% of those tenants that are cost burdened are severely cost burdened, so paying more than 50% of their income towards their rent. So as you can imagine, that leaves very little money left over for other essential needs. So utilities, medical bills, transportation, food, childcare, those other expenses that people need to take care of, which has contributed to not only to rent burden, but also the non-payment of rent that we have seen since the pandemic started. Ithaca is also evictions, and just some trends we wanted to highlight in eviction court. Again, this is from 2018, but in 2018, only about 3% of tenants in city eviction court had legal representation. And that is compared to over 90% of landlords that have legal representation in eviction court. So that kind of establishes this power dynamic where there's a lot of tenants that do have a viable defense to prevent these evictions, but because they don't have adequate legal assistance, they're being evicted from their homes. And most of these tenants are Black residents as well as female-headed households, so single women with children, and they're disproportionately subject to non-payment evictions in our area. And so kind of addressing that, Why is this? So Ithaca is disproportionately expensive for people of color. 54% of evictees in 2018 were Black residents, even though they only made up 6% of the city's population. And a majority of these, like I said before, were female single head of households with one or more children. So obviously that's a very alarming statistic and not one that a lot of people in our community are aware of. But when we're talking about a racial equity focus and racial justice in our community, this is, you know, a huge spot because housing is so essential. And there's a number of reasons for this. The one we wanted to highlight today, talking about rent burden, is that almost 75% of Black residents in the Ithaca metropolitan service area are paid less than a living wage compared to 28% of white residents. And that 49% of Black renters and 45% of Latinx renters are severely cost burdened with their rent, so paying more than 50% of their income towards that rent compared to 27% of white renters. So again, when you're paying that much money towards your rent and when you have a lower income compared to other people with the same skills, with the same background as you do in applying for these jobs, you're paying more money towards your rent, you have less left over to pay for other necessities, and sometimes the rent can take the back seat in that. Yes.
Simone?
Yeah.
Yes, please. Because of the statistics you just gave about the city of Ithaca residents, do those include students who don't have jobs? And
yeah, these statistics may include students. The statistics that are on the left are for people who attended eviction court. So these are very focused on the people who are actually being evicted from the city of Ithaca. The student population tends to have a higher turnover in terms of, you know, living in one residence for 1 to 2 years and then moving on to a new residence. But that's a great question.
And I also want to maybe go back to that slide right before that where you talked about this one. Does this include students in the top in the white?
Yeah, in the top in the white, that does include students. Yeah, so that is a part of the
students.
Reason why we have a high population of renters. But I think it also highlights how much of the student population is moving into the city of Ithaca, and how much of our, you know, long-term residents have been displaced from their housing to make room for the student population as well. But that is a great point to highlight. Yeah, that is part of this, why those numbers are so high.
Question. Yeah,
thank you. Thanks. Great.
So what is driving displacement in our community? So as many probably know, it's a common topic of discussion. There's an overall lack of affordable and adequate housing, and there's not a lot of assistance finding available housing that is there. There's a lot of college students moving into off-campus housing and using external resources to pay higher rents. You know, that could be family money or additionally, you know, student loans, things like that. But so basically there's a lot of renters, 74% renters, and there's a lot of people that can pay higher prices. So it just pushes the overall rental cost up. So a big portion of the population, you know, lower income people really struggle to pay the rents and find adequate housing.
Yeah, and I just kind of wanted to add kind of what we've seen, and these are all based on what we've seen on the 211 line and the calls that we're getting. So what we've seen since the pandemic started and how the pandemic is affecting those issues. So first, overall, there seem to be increased costs and lower incomes due to the pandemic. So increased costs since the pandemic started included, you know, when children weren't able to attend school in person. So there were increased childcare costs for high-risk people who were at high risk for COVID. They were getting food delivered. That was a higher cost, taking alternative transportation to avoid public transportation. So those are some examples of some increased costs that we saw during the pandemic, as well as lower income. So we know a lot of people were laid off in our community, especially those in the service industry. And there were some gaps in when people were receiving unemployment benefits because of how many people were applying for unemployment. So there was this gap where people weren't receiving income for months. Some people, you know, still haven't received income for those months. And there were also parents that were staying at home with their children who were attending school virtually. So a lot of reasons why people weren't able to work, especially in those early months of the pandemic before we had a vaccine and before we are where we are now. And when some of those people get behind in those bills, when you're living paycheck to paycheck and then you're not receiving that income anymore, you can get behind, especially for months of income. And a lot of people right now are still recovering from the bills that they had to pay during that time. We also see that incidences of domestic violence have increased since the beginning of the pandemic. So that's a huge driver of displacement in our community. And a lot of the time when victims and survivors of domestic violence are displaced from their housing due to safety concerns, there isn't, we have a really tight rental market. And so a lot of these people usually end up in emergency shelter, and that's driving a lot of displacement in our community. Next, we're also seeing a lot of strained landlord-tenant relationships that are causing tenants to leave their rental units, even if they have a right to be there. So a lot of landlords have, faced some financial hardship because they're not receiving rent for the units they used to receive rent for. And with the eviction moratorium, they've taken to asking their tenants directly for that rent. And just the stress and the pressure of not being able to afford that rent has driven a lot of tenants to move out, even in the wake of an eviction moratorium where they do have a right to stay in their housing. And then finally, we're finding that more landlords are selling tenant housing due to the increased real estate prices. So that means that there's less available units in our already tight rental market.
So how are we recovering and preventing displacement in our community? So first off, there are state and local programs, and George mentioned two of the programs that we wanted to highlight earlier. The first off is the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, or ERAP, which offers up to 12 months of back rent payments that were accrued since the start of the pandemic. And if up to 3 months of forward rent, if someone is rent burdened, paying 30% or more of their income towards their rent. Additionally, up to 12 months of back gas or electric as well. So this is a very big program, and we're the local community-based organization that's helping people to apply. It is an online application, but we offer assistance. We can do the application over the phone, answer questions about it. We work with tenants and landlords on that. So feel free to direct people our way to get assistance with that. Additionally, there is the United Way 2-in-1 ALICE program. Now this program also pays rent, but it focuses on a lot of other needs that people have that someone touched on earlier that are not getting paid because of the downturn in the economy and just lower income. So childcare, utility bills, phone bills, medical expenses, car repairs, car insurance. Additionally, just it could be food costs. So there's a variety of different things that this can cover here and offer additional support to people who are struggling.
And finally, we're also administering our in-house program. It's the Housing Stability Supplement Program. So that program provides $300 per month to eligible tenants. And we don't tell people how to spend that money. This is the basic income focus. So a lot of people might use it to pay for some of those necessities that Brett just talked about, and some of those other programs, or catch up on some of that debt from when the pandemic started. Through that program, we also offer warm referrals to local resources to help people address some of those needs or some other barriers that are exist in their lives. And our whole goal of that project is to just keep City of Ithaca residents within the City of Ithaca, to prevent displacement, to prevent eviction, and help people become more housing stable. Some priority groups for that funding, because we are working with a racial equity lens, are BIPOC tenants, as well as single head of households, based on the statistics that I gave earlier about who tends to be most evicted from our community, and also just, due to the disproportionate housing instability faced by those groups, largely due to systemic racism that still exists in our society. So,
So we're also attempting to recover and prevent displacement through the dissemination of tenants' rights and tenant advocacy to solve disputes with landlords. So Through the Evictions Displacement Defense Project, we are attending eviction court, as we mentioned earlier, and trying to offer resources to people. If people don't have legal assistance, we're referring them to either Law New York, who offers free or low cost, income-based legal assistance, so advice and actual legal defense, and the Tenants Legal Hotline, which has a group of supervised Cornell Law students who are supervised by a licensed attorney to offer advice and also offer legal support if it's needed. Additionally, we refer to the Ithaca Tenants Union, which is educating on tenants' rights and sort of doing community organizing to help prevent evictions and support tenants, and they're doing a lot of advocacy for tenants with landlords as well.
Another way our community is recovering from this is that these issues are more public and more people are talking about how we can prevent displacement in our community since the pandemic started. And throughout all the different headlines, all the different conversations, there seems to be a recognition of housing as this basic need and something that needs to be talked about. So just a few examples of different headlines that have come up about tenants' rights, about the eviction moratorium, about different actions that are happening to keep people in their housing, and just more and more every day, more than I feel like was talked about before the pandemic started.
And we also just want to touch on mutual aid, because this emerged during the pandemic in a big way to meet people's basic needs. Neighbors supporting neighbors. This is largely done through the Facebook group, Mutual Aid Tompkins and Mutual Aid Tompkins Immediate Needs. But working on the 211 line before, I was the 211 housing, one of the 211 housing specialists. Mutual Aid Tompkins was a great referral, especially when there weren't other existing programs, and we would post in there, and oftentimes people would rise to the occasion to help one of their neighbors get essential needs like food, or pick up a prescription, or other basic necessities for the home. So that's a great offering as well.
Yeah, and so finally, just some points about what we, based on our experience and our roles, think our community should invest in to prevent displacement of our long-term residents. So
yeah, if you know landlords, we encourage you to speak with them about these needs and some of the struggles that tenants are facing, and we know that landlords are facing as well. So referring to 211 for assistance with ERAP, for instance, can help get back rent paid. We're happy to work with tenants and landlords to get that application complete. If people don't have access to the internet, we can work with them over the phone or in the office if need be. And additionally, other friends, family, neighbors, anyone that you're aware of that has housing needs, if you could direct them to 211, we'll try to get them connected with the resources that can help their situation.
Yeah, the other thing that we would like to encourage is just to lobby for tenants' rights locally, to empower tenants and help keep them in their housing. The right to counsel has been a hot topic in Ithaca lately, and just got pushed up to the Common Council. So attending those meetings and talking about, that statistic about how 3% of tenants don't have legal representation when they're in eviction court to raise, a defense against their eviction. So we also have some phone numbers here for the county legislature, as well as Anna Kellis's office, if you're interested, and just letting them know that the community cares about these issues and wants to empower tenants in that way. And finally, we want to encourage people to invest in local programming and grants for projects that provide financial and legal aid to tenants in crisis through basic income. So projects like the Ithaca Eviction Displacement Defense Project. We just overall believe that a stable home is essential for the health and well-being of all of our tenants and everyone in Ithaca. Unstable housing really can just destabilize your entire life. It's hard to make it to your job. It's hard to make it to appointments when you're concerned about where you're going to be sleeping night to night. And so we just really want to help people stay in their housing and also to maintain the diversity of the Black and Brown communities that are still here in the city of Ithaca.
right, so yeah, now we can address any questions that people have.
I want to thank you both so much for not only the amount of information you packed into this and the resources you have in here. We'll let people know how they can get this PowerPoint, but also the ongoing work that you're doing. So Nancy has been monitoring the chat box. There's been a lot of questions, and we'll try to get through as many of as we possibly can. A lot of people are very interested in this topic. We might be bringing you guys back for round 2.
Okay, great.
Right. So I'm going to run into it very quickly because there are a lot, as George said. So there was a question about whether or not the 2 campuses, Cornell and the Ithaca College, have limits on how many students can live off campus. I believe they do. Maybe a question for campus.
I mean, I can.
I can raise my hand. I can raise my hand and just say, as a former student and double Cornellian and some that lived on, off, and worked at Cornell for many years, I don't think I've ever heard a policy at Cornell, anyways, on the number of students that can live off campus. No, in fact, it's increased. So, no, I mean, I feel this is not a thing at the university, but if anybody from the university is here, chime in. I feel the only rule we have is, I say we, they, us, is that no, I mean, there's no rules. In fact, freshmen can live off campus, but they just don't tell them that. I mean, that's my understanding. Anybody?
They push for them to live on campus. I understand that they really don't want them to live off campus and that they're building more housing for that in particular.
Also true. That's also true. 2 things are true. Yes, more housing on campus. We also have more students, but there's no rule. I don't believe, if someone can say or look it up, or we'll ask. Gary Stewart can tell us. There's no rule that you have to live on campus or off. It's you live where you want.
Okay,
Correct.
Let's get the answer from someone, and we can post that later. Someone who's on campus and in that area. Question, a different one. Has the rent burden changed over time? Have the numbers gone up?
Yeah, I think, yeah, overall, like the rent in Ithaca has increased again because of those. It's just a tighter rental market, and also because there's a lot of money coming into Ithaca from external sources. So from those student loans, from people's families, and it's just driving up the rent prices, and wages haven't significantly increased as much as the rent has. So I think over time, I would say yes.
And was the rental assistance program at INHS administered already this year, or have all the funds been distributed?
Yeah, the INHS program was administered. That offered up to 3 months. You know, it had a 80% area median income, and you had to be COVID impacted as well. But they're now referring to us for the or just generally to ERAP and for assistance to us now.
And that is ERAP too. You're still waiting on that? Because I had a question that someone has been waiting for 2 months for the emergency rental assistance.
Yes, that program has been sort of a slow rollout, and people. I saw someone asked. Some people are being paid. I know they were targeting 25% of the total funds in the state to be paid by the end of September, and we are seeing within our group that, it's about 20% or so have been paid so far. So money is getting out, but it's taking a long time. And some, the review process, they say 4 to 6 weeks, but we've seen it more like, 8 weeks or more on average, probably, I would say.
Yeah. I would also mention, though, that anyone who is facing eviction or is worried about being evicted from their home, if you apply for ERAP, it has some protections for tenants, and obviously we cannot give any legal advice. We have some referrals for that. If you are interested, you can give us a call at 211. But the ERAP application itself has protections in it that stay any eviction proceeding against that household while you are waiting for that determination of eligibility. So if you have submitted an ERAP application, you're still waiting to hear whether you've been approved or denied, and your landlord is still talking about evicting you from your home, just call us, talk to us about some legal assistance resources. But really, if you apply for ERAP, it is supposed to effectively stay that eviction proceeding until you find out whether or not you've been approved.
And we should state the obvious, call us means dial 211.
Yes.
Be
Dial
very
211,
specific
yeah.
about that. And also I've heard that the
Perfect.
application is not the easiest thing in the world to do. And the fact that you assist people with that is very valuable. Thank you for doing that. Nancy?
Good. I'm going to continue to plow through these. Thank you so much. The Alice program through the United Way, do they cover things like a mattress and tables and household items?
Yeah, well, we do have for that, we have a referral through reuse, which we can do. There's the remap program, which is a good option through, and you can call 211 and we can do a referral for that. But no, household goods, it sort of has to be like an essential need. I guess if you had no furniture, you know, they do look at it on a case to case basis, but not typically for furniture. We'd probably go through reuse for that. Or
Yeah,
May I ask a
question? HSC over here.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Brandy.
I was just gonna say UWTC over here. I can answer that question. Referrals for
Brandy,
anything that
There's
would
something wrong
stop
with your
from-
audio.
Yeah, Brandy, we're going to ask you to see if you can fix that audio there.
It's hard to understand what you're saying.
There's a lot of information needs here. There's a lot of folks doing really important work, and we really value the fact so many people are interested in this topic. And just make sure we stay connected with each other here, or we're going to keep moving forward.
Thank you, Brandy. Maybe you could put that in the chat. Any funds available to increase the quality of existing housing?
well, like, so you're like improving your present housing, like repairs and things like that, or
I assume so, yeah, maybe they're renting.
Mhm.
Yeah, there aren't any that come to mind immediately, but if they wanted to give us a call, I could, do some research on that, and I'd be happy to get back to them with that referral. Because we have a whole database, when we are working on the 211 line, that we could kind of comb through and see what the appropriate resource would be for that.
Yeah.
For their specific situation.
INHS does offer some repair assistance as well. That's one resource that we could refer you to. Also, just general, the United Way Alice or the Robin Fund would be another just general financial assistance option to get some improvements to your existing apartment. Yeah, so those are two that come to mind.
May I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm in Syracuse. My name's Mary Elizabeth.
Uh-huh.
I have a certain set of circumstances that being displaced, I am low income, but I'm finding that I'm being left out of the standard. Is there a description for Ithaca's low income status?
How we define what low income is considered, and the folks from I'm sorry, go ahead.
And does that include Syracuse?
Yeah. And I'm assuming the folks from 211 can also help you find an analog. If you can certainly call 211, find information about Ithaca that way. But also, I'm assuming Onondaga County has something very similar. I don't know whether you've had a chance to access them or not. But how is low income defined? And is it particular to Ithaca, or is it more universal? The ERA program to state program.
Yes, so the measure we typically use with some of our programming is area median income, which is basically, I wish I had pulled up the definition of that, but basically the area median income for our area is roughly $60,000. And then we would say the very low income limit is about 30% of that area median income. So roughly around $20,000, and that increases with your household size. And then 50% of the area median income would be considered low income. So it really is relative to the area that you're living in. And so that might be different for Syracuse, and that also might be used to inform other programming in that area. That's generally how we would measure that.
Yeah, that sounds appropriate right there. My problem is that I am over 60 years old, and I've done several different categories of employment, and find myself displaced after helping raise my great-granddaughter. And now I would like to not do Walmart or, you know, just
Mhm.
fade away after I've developed all these skills and talents. You'd
Right.
think I could make something of myself. I don't look or fit the part, and I face a lot of prejudice from people who think that I am like trying to play the system,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
because everything I have on, I got, including shoes and purse and hairdo, everything I got from some type of charitable organization, including the Women's Opportunity Center, especially what I'm dressed in now.
Mhm.
And I appear not to need anything.
But you do, and you have needs. Would
And
folks
my
at
needs are so great.
yes, would folks at 211 be willing and able to have a conversation with you? Said it's Mary Elizabeth, right?
No, yeah, but you could just call me Zia. It's a big name.
Okay.
Z is easy. Z is easy. Yeah, I've called 211 several times in Onondaga County. And in fact, the most help I got, I actually called a number by error that led me to Thompson
Okay.
County. But Tompkins quickly reverted me back to Onondaga. And my previous experience over the past 3 years is that I've been so long as a homeless person because they give me nothing but, you know, I'm not handled properly.
Okay. Well, we have, this is, I think, emblematic of multiple problems that multiple people are experiencing in different unique ways. Let's figure out a way to
Right.
make a connection with you to see how we can solve that particular problem. But this is just an example of multiple issues that the system's not perfect, needs still exist, and we need to do better. So thank
Mr.
you for,
Ferrari?
Yeah,
Mr. Ferrari? is it?
George, yeah.
Yeah, George, you would actually make a connection with me and try to help me?
Sure. I'm happy to have a conversation with you.
Well, I use my
So-
email address to sign on, and that's how you contact me.
I will send you an email.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Now,
We-
I have one more question.
I'm sorry, we're going to need to end now because we're a little bit beyond time. But I do think we'll do an additional one of these because there's so much interest and so much information and so much need around all of these issues. So we are likely to do something before the end of the year again on sort of housing needs and resources part 2, and those things might change over time. But I will send you an email, Zia, and we will end this here. Thank you for your interest, knowing there aren't perfect answers to every question. You're asking questions is really important. And I want to thank the work of Simone and Brett and all the folks who are part of the housing system here in Tompkins County. Our next event at the Community Foundation is the Women's Fund. That's October 14th. It's virtual. Information's on our website. I did share with you also a link to our website of where you can find the recording of this particular Let's Talk and the PowerPoint and all others. So I want to thank you all for being here, and we'll stay connected and try to figure out how to solve these problems. Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.